complexity of this problem and the vastness of it. And then we will realize that we are going to have to forget some of these so-called organizational principles and organizational aims and objectives, and realize that the real principle, the real aim, and the real objective is a solution to the problem.
A police state. Just make the Negro neighborhood a police state. It's the most heavily patrolled. It has more police in it than any other neighborhood. Yet it has more crime in it than any other neighborhood. How can you have more cops and more crime? Why? It shows you that the cops must be in cahoots with the criminals. You make my point. That as long as a white man does it, it's all right. A black man is supposed to have no feelings. We want freedom by any means necessary. We want justice by any means necessary. We want equality by any means necessary. We want it now, or we don't take anybody to death.
So whatever kind of action program can be devised to get us the things that are ours by right, then I'm for that kind of action no matter what the action is. I don't think when a man is being criminally treated that some criminal has the right to tell that man what tactics to use to get the criminal off his back. When a criminal starts misusing me, I am going to use whatever is necessary to get that criminal off my back. And the injustice that has been inflicted upon Negroes in this country by Uncle Sam is criminal. Don't blame a cracker in Georgia for your injustices. The government is responsible for the injustices. The government can bring these injustices to halt. And what you and I have to let the man know is we are peaceful people. We are loving people. We love everybody who loves us. But we don't love anybody who doesn't love us.
Yo, let's go. Hey, Uhuru, peace, family. Welcome to We Charge Colonialism podcast. I'm Ikemba Jore, one of the organizers, one of the host writers at We Charge Colonialism. So make sure you continue to tap into the work that we're doing. At We Charge Colonialism, we are anti-colonial Pan-African think tank. And yeah, it's our job to control our narrative. So, you know, we are part of that decolonization process that's taking place across the world as it pertains to African people as we continue this fight for liberation. Because that should be the only struggle, man. The only struggle for Black people should be to be a self-determined people, to get ourselves from under the yoke of colonialism. Anything else is uncivilized, and in my opinion. So with that being said, man, I'm an African internationalist. Shout out to Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who gave us the theory of African internationalism. And, it's just, when we talk about African internationalism, it's just making a clear distinction of what our objectives and what our goals are, should be as African people. And that's for the African working class to organize and become a self-determined people, to overturn colonial capitalism, to unite Africa and to unite African people all over the world. But the talk for today, though, is Malcolm X. This is Malcolm X's centennial. And, unless you're lucky, most of us only come across these centennials once in a lifetime. And so we celebrate Malcolm X because of the sacrifice that he gave. I mean, he paid the ultimate price. In his own words, he said, if you're not willing to pay that price, the ultimate price for freedom, keep that word out of your vocabulary. And when asked what that ultimate price is, Malcolm's response, the ultimate price for freedom is death, right? So he knew that, and he never wavered in his fight for African liberation. So, this series, this is the first of many studies that's going to be happening throughout the year. I'm talking about all the way to December, folks. We're going to be doing this, and we're just going to be looking at Malcolm X's life through his words and through the words of other people. So, we're going to get more different perspectives and look at Malcolm, the man, through many lenses. And I'm inviting anybody and everybody to definitely join and be a part of this. I'll put an invite link in the chat if anybody wants to come up and join in this discussion. Whether you read any of the work or seen any of the videos or not, but if you have something to say about Malcolm X, reaction to what you hear, definitely come through and join this conversation. Man, I'm excited though. Like I said, this is the first one. Before we get into it, like today, I'm going to be covering 2 chapters. I'm going to be looking at chapter 1 of Les Payne's Dead Are Rising, and chapter 1 of Manning Marable's Malcolm X, The Reinvention. So I'm kind of going to be looking at both these chapters and comparing the two, or at least discussing the two. And before I get into both of those books, though, I just want to let everyone know a couple of things that's coming up. I know everyone that taps in may not be local, but if you're in like the Philadelphia area, there is a couple of things that's coming up I just want to make people aware of. In February 23rd, as you can see, there's going to be an event that We Charge Colonialism is organizing, but there's going to be several organizations involved, as well as the Claim Malcolm X Day Committee, who's a part of this as well. So that's February 23rd from 1 to 7. And, that's the Malcolm X seminar, film screening discussion, and a plan for action. Not just talking, when we lead these programs, we want to, what's the work? Because we are about carrying out work and carrying on the legacy of Malcolm X, completing the struggle for self-determination that was taking place in the 60s. And May 17th in Philadelphia, there's going to be the 10th annual Malcolm X Day Festival, a centennial commemoration. So if you're in the area, definitely tap in. But I'm sure wherever you are, there's going to be some things going on in your area. So look out for that. So how's everybody doing, man? I appreciate y'all tapping in. Make sure to like and share so we can get some folks on here to tap into this, and subscribe to the channel if this is your first time here. First, I want to get into a little background of these books I'm going to be looking at today. And I'm not for certain if I'm going to be going into chapter 2 the next time we get together, maybe looking at some articles. I'll be switching it up. But this is what we're doing today, though. We're going to look at these books and look at the beginning. It's really taking us back to 1925, so 100 years ago. What did things look like? Just giving a little context of the world that Malcolm X is going to be coming into. And I think both these authors do a good job at that. Manning Marable, just to give background on Marable, was an American scholar, political activist, and historian known for his work on African American studies and race relations in the United States. He was born in 1950 and was a professor at Columbia University and founding director of the Institute for Research in African American Studies. Marable authored numerous books and articles that analyze the complexities of race, economics, and social justice. But his most notable work is one we're going to be looking at today, Malcolm X, A Life of Reinvention, which earned him a Pulitzer Prize for History in 2012. Throughout his career, Marable's scholarship aimed to bring attention to the issues of inequality and the historical context of the African American experience. Marable passed away on April 1st in 2011. In his book, Malcolm X, A Life of Reinvention, he's going to offer a comprehensive, nuanced portrait of the Black liberation movement leader, that being Malcolm X. The biography explores Malcolm X's transformation from a street hustler to a prominent spokesperson for the Nation of Islam and eventually to a broader advocate for human rights. Marable is going to delve into his complex personality, his ideological evolution, and the influence of key figures in his life. The book also sheds light on his relationship struggles and circumstances surrounding his assassination, presenting a multifaceted view of a man who continues to inspire and provoke discussion about race, identity, and social justice. Marable's book is going to get a lot of flack. There's going to be a lot of pushback when this book came out, and rightfully so. You know, I think like there's some things that Marable does or talks about in the book that people felt that was he didn't have enough evidence to make some of these claims or suggestions. I'm gonna say suggestions because in the book, from my reading of it, I felt like he wasn't making a claim. It was more so he was taking the evidence and saying that, you know, it's possible. Some people said that this may have happened, but it's circumstantial and so forth, right? And I know that people argue like, okay, if you don't have the evidence for it, then why put it in the book? But I don't know. Me personally, I didn't have a problem with it. You know, I think, you know, you're going to get different perspectives. It's up for us to be critical, look at these things. And I mean, for me, I looked at it and it says circumstantial. I'm not going to take it that it may have happened. And I'll get into some actually as we get into the book, because I will be covering it throughout the year. We'll look at some of those things that he talks about in the book that people had a issue with. But I think all of these, I mean, Les Payne, you can say that he does the same thing as well. But, you know, just some little background about Les Payne. He was an American journalist and author known for his impactful work in investigative journalism and social commentary. He was a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter for Newsday, where he covered a variety of important issues, including civil rights and social justice. Throughout his career, Payne was dedicated to highlighting the stories of marginalized communities and addressing systemic inequalities. In addition to his journalism, he authored several books, including The Dead Are Rising, The Life of Malcolm X, which he co-wrote with his daughter, Tamara Payne. This biography reflects his deep commitment to understanding and articulating the complexities of the African American experience. Payne's contribution have had a lasting impact on journalistic integrity and advocacy for social change. And you know, Payne is going to transition, pass away before the completion of his book, and so his daughter, that's why she's down as a co-author, because she's going to help with the completion of the text. The Dead Are Rising, The Life of Malcolm X by Les Payne and Tamara Payne presents an in-depth exploration of Malcolm X's life and legacy. This biography draws on extensive research and interviews, highlights his journey from childhood to become a pivotal figure in the civil rights movement. The author examines his early experiences with racism, the impact of his time in prison, his transformation into a key spokesperson for the Nation of Islam, and his later evolution towards a broader advocacy for human rights. The book offers insights into his relationships, ideologies, and events surrounding his assassination, portraying Malcolm X as a complex and transformative figure whose influence continues to resonate today. And yeah, I think it's important too, like to see that, you know, they have different backgrounds. Les Payne, you know, he has a journalistic background. Yeah, Manning Marable, who's a historian and academic. But both of these books, I read both of these books, and they're both pretty good, in my opinion. If I was to give you, you know, a choice or option on which one to go after first, the Les Payne, I would say the Les Payne book, man, I did enjoy that one, or found it to be a better read than the Malcolm, and I think it has a lot to do with his writing style. I'm going to be honest. Marable's book is like really really academic. I heard he had like 20 scholars helping him, write the book, do research and write the book as well. Which I didn't mind that much either. But as far as just like style, I think the lay reader would probably enjoy the Les Payne book more than the Manning Marable book, right? So to get into like the chapters, chapter 1 of both of these books, Marable's book first chapter is titled "Up, You Mighty Race." So even in the title itself, you get where you kind of see where he's going if you're familiar with Marcus Garvey and the Garvey movement. Up, you mighty race, and accomplish what you will, and in the chapter in Marable's first chapter, he's going to discuss a lot of Garvey and Garveyism. He's going to give us that context, which is important because Garveyism is going to have an influence on Malcolm X's parents. They both were Garveyites. Oh, let me put this link in the chat too. Yeah, hey, check it out in Chroma. And I read the Manning. See, I only read Les Payne's book once, but it's a more recent read too. Book. It just came out, I think, last year. Maybe it might have been out for 2 years now. But Manning Marable's book, I've read that twice, but it's been years since I read it. So rereading this is going to be good for me because I'm like reading it again as I'm preparing for these podcasts. All right, so anybody who want to join, if you read the book or you want to give some insight on some of the things that we're talking about, such as Garvey, for instance, definitely pop up, join the discussion. I want it to be like that sort of thing as we go throughout the year, and the goal is Tuesdays and Sundays to be doing this. But going back to Marable, he's going to be focusing on Marcus Garvey. But the chapter itself, I will admit, like the chapter itself, he's covering more ground than Les Payne. And well, that's a good thing, and that's up to the reader. But he's covering Malcolm X's before the birth of Malcolm X, what's taking place in America prior to his birth. And then he's going to talk about, in regards to, he's going to be covering the parents' experience, right? Earl Little and Louise Little. But he's also going to talk about the birth of Malcolm X. And he's going to go into Malcolm X's, formative years and what was taking place during that time. So he's sort of giving you a look into all of the things that is happening all the way up to Malcolm X really moving to Boston to live with Ella. That's how much time he's covering. And so when you go to Les Payne's chapter 1, Les Payne, got somebody join. I'm gonna bring you right up. When we look at Les Payne is going to only cover the period of time all the way up to Louise Little being pregnant with Malcolm, but Malcolm is not going to be yet born in Les Payne's book. So there's more focus in Les Payne's book on the parents and what's happening in their life and the experiences that they are going through prior to Malcolm being born. So you get more of that in Les Payne's book. Oh, I thought I brought you up. Are you? Hold on. Yeah, I don't.
Can you hear me?
There we go. I got you. Yeah, I can hear you. I couldn't see.
Right.
But there's some background. Are you there?
Yeah, there's some background going on right now.
Yeah, I hear. Let me see if I'm muting myself.
Is it going on?
Go ahead. I'm gonna mute myself when you go ahead. Go ahead. You can go right ahead.
I had it on a speaker. I'm having to do different things now that my computers have been shut down. But go ahead, continue what you were saying. I want to talk about Malcolm's Aunt Ella as well when we get a chance.
Uhuru. Yeah, and you may have to mute because it's okay. There we go. Right on. That's Conrad Sayero. Uhuru. Thanks for joining. So yeah, like now, like we're saying, like in Les Payne's book, he's going to cover more of what's taking place prior to Malcolm's being born. So that's how the chapters end for both of these, right? So Marable, he begins his book with talking about Earl Little. Earl Little being born in Reynolds, Georgia. That's where Earl Little is born in Reynolds, Georgia. That's where he comes up at, right? And he's born in 1890. Just to give that context, right? So 1890, he's born. This is like 6 years before Plessy versus Ferguson, right? But it's during Jim Crow era. But Jim Crow is going to, with Plessy versus Ferguson, that's going to set the precedent right there. Though you have black codes and Jim Crow already happening, but Plessy versus Ferguson, right? It sort of is going to validate separate but equal, discrimination in this country. So this is, and this is, a little more than a decade after the ending of Reconstruction, the Reconstruction period. So that's happening, and Earl's coming into that world, Malcolm X's father. Louise Little, or Louise is being Malcolm's mother, is born in Grenada. She's born in Grenada in 1897. So she's not even in America. She doesn't come to America until she marries Earl. So we'll get to that because she goes from Grenada to Canada with her uncle. So we'll get to that in a second. But so Earl, this is how Manning Marable starts his book, right? In contrast to Les Payne begins his book talking about Louise Little. It begins with Louise Little, and Louise Little she's in Omaha, and she's standing on her porch with Wilford, who's the firstborn. That's the oldest brother, Wilford, and the other two children that are born at this time. You have Filbert and you have Hilda. They're young. Hilda, I think, is a baby. They're in the house, right? But these are the three children that is with her at the time. And the Ku Klux Klan arrives at the home. And Earl Little, I can't remember if I know in the movie X, they show the Klan ride up on the Little family, but Earl Little, if I can recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, Earl Little is there with the family. But Les Payne, he's talking about a different situation where the Klan comes up. Earl Little isn't home, but that might have been in the movie. So I don't know. It's been a while. But that's a thing too. It's like, they kind of begin. Les Payne begins his book sort of like how Spike Lee begins his movie. So they come up to in Les Payne's book, the Klan. They come and they terrorizing the family, break out one of the windows, and they leave. And Les Payne talks about this through his interviews. With Wilford, he's interviewing several people, so I'm not going to be able to give you like all the names and so forth. So excuse me if I leave like where some of this information is coming from, but I'll just let you know what book I'm talking about. Les Payne talks about how the father not being there was probably good. The father, Earl Little, was in Milwaukee. He was in Milwaukee, and he was preaching in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at the time, which is going to be a place where they move. So not at this time, they're going to move from Omaha to Milwaukee. So you have that connection. So, Earl Little, he heads back home, but this is how Les Payne begins. He begins with Louise, and I think Payne does a better job than Marable in regards to giving some backstory about Louise. So most of what I talk about in regards to Louise really comes from Les Payne, at least in the first chapter. So knowing that she's coming from Grenada and she's moving with her uncle to Montreal in 1917, Les Payne is covering all of that. And then the other interesting thing, just to give some a little background too, like Earl Little, going back to the Marable book, because he does focus, he centers Earl Little more in his chapter, and so we know like Earl Little, he's born in Georgia, Reynolds, Georgia. He's what the whites will call the uppity, Negro. He's going to Uhuru, Black Power. He's going to, be considered a troublemaker. I mean, he's standing up for himself. And his parents are landowners. They're not sharecroppers, just to give that backstory. So, he's growing up in a family, in a household where they're independent, but he's growing up in the segregated South. Georgia, I think, like as far as lynching, like one of the leading states in which lynching is taking place, the lynching of Negroes is taking place. So, Earl Little, his parents are, begging him to tone it down a bit. But Earl Little is married to Daisy, sister. What's my sister name? Daisy. Daisy Mason, right? He marries Daisy Mason in 1909, right? So he's married to Daisy Mason in 1909. He has 3 children. And so who are those 3 children? You have Ella, who's the oldest, right? If you're familiar with Malcolm X's story, Ella, is the oldest of the children. And she is the one later on that's going to bring Malcolm to Boston. And Marable, he talks about this. He covers Malcolm's life before his birth and his formative years all the way up to, like in his first chapter, at least to when he's around 16 years old and he moves to Boston around the age of 16. And Ella is going to bring Malcolm to Boston. So that's that Ella, right? You have Ella, you have Mary, and then there's Earl Jr. Those are the 3 children that Earl is going to father with Daisy Mason before leaving to Philadelphia. So Earl, he's going to leave. He leaves his family behind, and like there's no. I'm assuming he's whatever. Him and Daisy is at odds. And Earl Little is a record of Earl, being an abusive husband, to Daisy, and even with Louise. So there's conflict. There's conflict with Daisy Mason's family, who probably doesn't like the way Earl Little is treating Daisy. And Earl, he just gets fed up and he leaves and he goes to Philadelphia for various reasons, probably family, as well as just being ran out, either leave or die. And a lot of people are going to leave the South as a result of that. So he comes with the great migration of Africans, blacks leaving the South and going to different places, right? Philadelphia is his destination, which was my people's destination. My people's come from South Carolina on my father's side and my mother's side. So I got like on 2 sides family members who came through the Great Migration. So I'm my ancestors or descendants, I should say, who were here are not even originally from Philadelphia. Like I can't trace my family. I'm born and raised here. My mother and father born and raised in Philadelphia. Yeah. But they are products of parents who are grandparents that came through that Great Migration. I mean, I find it, interesting. A lot of us have that story, right? So, Earl, he ends up in Philadelphia, and this is where he gets exposed to the Garvey movement. He gets exposed to the Garvey movement. Now, you get more of this in Manning Marable's book, hence the title, right? Up, You Mighty Race. He's going to cover a lot of what Garvey's influence. Manning Marable covers the legal issues that Garvey went through and his deportation. He covers some of even like the internal conflicts that are taking place within the Garvey movement. But he, talks about the tremendous impact that the Garvey movement is going to have, and millions of members that are going to come into the Garvey movement, right? And just the effect that Garvey has, not just in the United States, but outside the United States. So he does get into like the founding of the UNIA being in 1914. And Garvey's going to come to America in 1916, I believe. He founds the UNIA in 1917. Which is interesting. 1917 is the same year that Louise, Malcolm's mother, is going to move to Quebec, right, Montreal. And I believe that that Louise's, because Louise is going to become a Garveyite, she's going to join the Garvey movement, but I believe her uncle was also a Garveyite. So that's where that influence is going to come from. Earl, who's in Philadelphia, is going to be traveling with Garveyites who are going around, I guess you could say, like spreading the word, right? Proselytizing, however you want to put it. But he goes with them to Canada. And this is how he meets Louise, like traveling with Garveyites, going to meetings in Montreal. And he meets and he stays and marries Louise in Montreal. And so they move. Louise and Earl is going to move from Montreal to Philadelphia, where he was staying already. And this is where Wilford is born. Wilford is going to be born in 1920. So being from Philadelphia, we claiming Wilford. All right. But Wilford is going to be born here in 1920. And I think they stayed for a couple of years before they move out to Omaha. Now, in Les Payne's book, Les Payne is going to talk more about the Red Summer. Les Payne is covering more of the Red Summer. He's covering more of what is happening during World War, the contradictions like during World War I with whites and blacks, immigrants, white immigrants moving, or European immigrants moving into the country, and sort of this conflict between blacks and those who are part of the quote unquote white community in this competition for jobs. Blacks are being brought into Omaha as strike breakers. And so, that's going to cause a lot of, turmoil. I mean, we, just digress. It's something, I like to point out so that our people can learn from, let's not be those Irish, those Irish and those Italians, man, who treated blacks, who were just trying to make a living because of the oppression and exploitation that they was facing, and just looking for opportunities and jobs, right? And was willing to go and undermine the working class in their own interests, right? Because that's what's happened, but that's what colonial capitalism does. It plays the working class against one another. And so racism becomes a weapon that's used by the white ruling class to get the masses of white people to attack, to be their lapdogs, right? And attack the African working class. This is what happens, and they do it today. But I digress. We can have that conversation, but I see that clock ticking. But Brother Sayer, before I go on, I want to give you an opportunity, and I'll put
Uhuru, comrade. Uhuru, can you hear me?
Hey, Uhuru, you a little low. I can hear you clear though. But go right ahead.
Are you getting any feedback?
When I'm off mute, but I'm gonna go on.
Okay, let me tell you, I appreciate this study tonight because it gives us a deep background into Malcolm's family lineage with regards to Earl, his father, his mother Louise, and how the Garvey movement was an organization of organizing. You speak of organizing for African internationalism. That was a strong sector because there was over 6 million African people here in the United States that followed Malcolm, just in the United States alone. And I mean, so followed Marcus Garvey, I should say. And it was so strong. And you mentioned something down the road that what was happening was strike breaking. When you mentioned the Irish against the African or black people that live here in the country, that's always been a weapon that they've used. They played that card. Actually, it's a colonial mode of production. It's not racism as it's been used these days in terms of black and white. No, this is all surely and purely economics. This is surely parasitic cannibalism and colonialism. You know, we're the footstool of where the finances and resources come out of, which is Africa. And then we have all those other countries across the world who've also been resource stripped by the United States of America. Right now, and I'm gonna leave it right there. Trump is coming in saying he's going to use the military to take Canada and Panama. So here we go with this strong arm tactic, the point of a gun, no different than what Biden did with Palestine, using the weaponized Israeli regime, which was instituted in 1948, but weaponized before then in 1942, to take the land and take the resources, and then to genocide the people. So when we look at what Malcolm was doing, the heritage of Malcolm and internationalism, this is where the chairman, O'Malley, picked up after Malcolm was assassinated. And you notice that every movement that is being made is significant. The strong attempt to shut it down and shut its mouth, stop the freedom of speech, has always been ensued, and especially on us, because we're not valued. Dred Scott, I believe, said in the bill that a black man's words are words that don't have to be respected by white people. And we see this more and more. And these are the things I see that Malcolm was so straightforward on, very exacting. When he would shoot back, it was irrefutable. The best debater I've ever seen. Then I look at Chairman O'Malley as well. So we are in a time now where things are escalated. I'm going to be quiet after this. And it is good to listen to Malcolm as a note, as a mapper of what we need to do and his lineage. We're at war, and again, it's about to get real bloody. So,
hey, Uhuru. Now I appreciate that, and I put a link into the chat, just a little information about Red Summer, if you know folks aren't familiar with that history. But you're going to have like 30 to 40 cities across the United States in the year of 1919 that are going to experience race massacres, what they call race riots, you know. But in a lot of these areas, you're going to see, you know, black communities destroyed, scores, you know, numerous amounts of black people having to leave their communities and leave the cities and move to other places because of the terrorism that was inflicted on them by the Klan, because that's another thing that is spoken about in both of these chapters. Just is the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, and then you're going to have another group, the Black Legion, and Omaha is a Ku Klux Klan hotbed. And it seems that when you look at what the Littles go through, and I think both of the books do a great job of giving you that experience of the Littles family, everything that they had to go through in regards to just the amount of terror the Ku Klux Klan and white people were inflicting on them. And that family, the Littles family, represents just a microcosm what they went through of what with millions of Black people were going through at that time. And so that's something that we have to think about, like, just the Littles having to move from and also, outside of the terrorism, just the discrimination, work discrimination, so economically being oppressed. And so having to go from place to place just to find a living, make a living, right? So they go from Philadelphia and they move to Omaha to live with Earl's brother. Earl's brother is going to be living out in Omaha. They bring him out there. They stay in Omaha. Malcolm is born in Omaha, but they will leave Omaha to Milwaukee, and just the Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And if we look at, for the sake of time, I'm just going to, some of the places that they, Earl himself, is going, some of the places they live, Earl is going to start off in Georgia. Louise starts off in Grenada. Earl moves to Philadelphia. Louise moves to Montreal. They meet in Montreal, move back to Philadelphia. So Earl goes to Montreal, comes back to Philadelphia. Then they go to Omaha, Nebraska. They go from Omaha, Nebraska to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Have to leave Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and go to East Chicago, Indiana. And then they go from East Chicago, Indiana to Michigan, Lansing, Michigan, right? And that's where Malcolm's father is going to be murdered. And both chapters cover the murder of Malcolm's father and the impact that it's going to have on Manning Marable is going to cover the death of Malcolm's father. In the book, in Les Payne's book, we don't get that far. Remember, Malcolm's not born yet. So they're still in Omaha at the end of chapter 1 in Les Payne's book. So, like that's the thing. Les Payne's book, like I said, I read the book. I like how, even in the book, there's a chapter on Malcolm's time, his organizing in Hartford, Connecticut. Man, it goes into detail into that. Just to give you an example, it's just like some of the things like Les Payne does that you don't really get in a lot of the other biographies, right? Particularly like Manning Marable, but I think Manning Marable does some things that Les Payne doesn't do either. So if you read both of them, I think you're going to, get a well-rounded education on Malcolm X. And actually, like, there's another biography I got back here, Bruce Perry biography. His chapters are really short, right? And I'm probably cover some of that at some point. But back to these two though. So those are all of the places that they live, right? And just some other background I want to give as far as the children. Earl Little is going to have 8 children. But Louise does have another child after Earl Little is murdered. And I want to talk more about that in a second. So there's going to be Ella, Mary, and Earl, who is going to be the children that Earl has with his first wife, Daisy, who he never divorced. And he goes and he marries Louise. Earl has some contradictions. I will not front on that, right? And then with Louise, he's going to father Wilfred, Filbert, Hilda, Then there's going to be Malcolm. Malcolm is going to be Earl Little's 7th child. And then there's Reginald, who's born after Malcolm. So Reginald is going to be the youngest child by Earl. But then Louise meets someone, which is discussed in Manning Marable's book. And there's a 9th child, an 8th sibling to Malcolm X. So Malcolm X, from the information that we have, has 8 siblings. The name of the don't have the name of the. If you know the name of the youngest sibling, put it in the chat, man. I'll get the name, but I don't have that right now. So the other thing I wanted to mention, I want to get into like the Omaha with Les Payne. He's going to cover the race riots in Omaha, and he talks about Will Brown, that lynching. And I'm not going to go much into that lynching. He covers a lot of detail with that. So it's sort of like, I think they both, this is what they both do. Les Payne is going to sort of digress from the family, the parents of Malcolm X and their story of Malcolm X. And the context he focuses on the most, I think, in his chapter is Red Summer, but particularly like what's taking place in Omaha, where Malcolm is going to be born at. And so what does that look like before Malcolm's birth? What Manning Marable does is he covers more of Garvey and the Garvey movement, right? And the sort of influence that has on the parents who are both Garveyites. And you know, Garvey from the history, like Garvey is going to spend time in the homes, the Littles' home. He goes to Omaha and spend time there. So there's a relationship, a personal relationship that Malcolm's parents have with Garvey. And, you know, Louise serves as a secretary. So they had major roles. They played a major role. They were active members in the Garvey movement. And the teachings of Garvey, that practice and what they believe, they applied that in the home. So that's going to have an influence on Malcolm X, who's going to talk about Garvey later on in his life, right? But the Omaha, I'm gonna before we get off, play just a short clip of the Will Brown lynching, because I think that, you know, it's an important moment in history, and sometimes we see this picture of Will Brown and don't even know that that's him. So it's one of those clips that I've, you know, shown in class and I talk about often. So I do want to bring that into this discussion. But just a few more points that I think I should make. So with Les Payne, well, Manning Marable, Les Payne is going to have a different sort of, due to his research, his view on what happened to Malcolm X's father, Earl Little, he really goes into detail on that. So I'm kind of jumping ahead and talking about this in regards to Les Payne, but because Manning Marable sort of has a different perspective on what happened to Earl Little, which I really agree with Manning Marable's take more than Les Payne. And that's because Les Payne is really going to, you know, so he sort of looks at what happened being an accident. He's saying, like, in regards to just like the evidence, it looks like it probably was an accident, and the Ku Klux Klan didn't have anything to do with Earl Little's death. Manning Marable, he doesn't get that deep into it, and I will admit, like, Les Payne may have done more research as a journalist and talked to more people, but I don't know, some things just don't add up. But even with Malcolm X, during the research, they say like Malcolm X sort of contradicted himself a few times, where he did say it was an accident, but this is what he was being told. But Malcolm X will also say that his father was killed by the Ku Klux Klan. He was 6 years old at the time. Like, Earl Little is going to be murdered. I'm gonna say murdered in 1931. And this is, around the time you're going to have the rise of the Nation of Islam, or at least the founding. I don't know if we want to call it a rise. It was a small group at first, but just to give some more context, man. But Earl Little is going to be murdered in 31. Malcolm's around 6 years old when this murder takes place. So he only knows what he's being told. But Manning Marable covers a lot of that in that first chapter. So really, it's 7:50. I'm going to show this clip really quick. This is Willie Lynch. This is in Omaha. This is what Les Payne is talking about in chapter 1. So check this out, man.
In the late 1800s, Omaha, Nebraska was a booming western city that was soon to become #1 in the world in livestock meat production. In the early 1900s, nearly 80% of Omaha's population, of an estimated 125,000 people, had livestock-related jobs. These workers were primarily of European descent, and from 1910 to 1919, their participation in labor strikes and the First World War left many vacancies at the meat packaging plants. To fill the void, company owners vigorously recruited blacks in the southern states. There were ads in papers in Omaha and throughout the South that beckoned blacks to come north to better wages and living conditions. The wages that blacks were paid at the Omaha plants were lower than white workers, but it was significantly more money than they could earn in the South. Hundreds of blacks began to replace white plant workers, and by 1915, a burgeoning black community was established near the meat packaging plants in South Omaha and the near north side of the city. A new African American newspaper called The Monitor began circulation in the summer of 1915. The Monitor was published weekly with news stories, columns, and advertising that was vital to establishing a strong sense of community among blacks in Omaha. By 1920, over 10,000 African Americans were living in Omaha. Because of the rapid growth in the African American population and employment situations at the meat packaging plants, racial tension began to build in Omaha. This tension culminated in the summer of 1919, when one plant worker in particular met a horrible fate.
This was the period of red hot summer. This was the period whereby what it is, you'd already had riots in St. Louis, other places. And now you're having them in Omaha. What happened was they had a woman say that she had been molested or had been sexually abused by a black man. And that's all that needed to be said.
On September 25th, 1919, Agnes Lobeck identified 40-year-old Will Brown as the man who attacked her. Brown was then arrested and taken to the Douglas County Courthouse. Before Brown was even identified, a civic storm was already brewing in Omaha due to a series of inflammatory stories published in the Omaha Bee and struggles for political power between racketeer Thomas Dennison and Omaha's mayor Edward Smith.
What's interesting is that the mayor attempted to keep them from taking Will Brown out of jail. And he suffered from an inch of his life being taken from him. And that was really the intent from the very beginning, to really kill him, as well as to bring about the racial tension even more so.
On the evening of September 28, 1919, a crowd of an estimated 5,000 to 10,000 people gathered outside the Douglas County Courthouse and demanded that Brown be handed over to them. Inside the courthouse, a frightened judge and other prisoners sent a note down to the crowd, saying that they would surrender Brown. The bloodthirsty crowd could not wait and rushed into the courthouse to seize Brown. Once in the hands of the crowd, Brown was beaten, hung from a lamppost, and shot more than 100 times. Actor Henry Fonda, at the time just 14 years old, witnessed the horrendous event from a second-story window at his father's printing company across the street from the courthouse. The ghastly melee ended with the burning of Will Brown's body. An Omaha World Herald photographer captured one of the most infamous photographs in American history. After the riot, federal troops were called in, and for 2 days, Omaha was under martial law. Even though over 100 people were arrested in connection with the riot and the murder of Will Brown, no one was charged. For Omaha's black community, an editorial picture published in the Monitor spoke volumes. Will Brown was buried in 1919 in an unmarked grave in Potter's Field at Forest Lawn Cemetery in Omaha. 90 years later, in July of 2009, a man from Riverside, California, Chris Hebert, who has no ties to the city of Omaha and has never visited before, was moved to pay $450 of his own money for a marker for Will Brown's grave. Hebert said that he watched a special on actor Henry Fonda, which mentioned the riot and how it affected his life and his acting career. Hebert also said that he hopes people will stop by the headstone and reflect on what happened to Will Brown in 1919, so that we may never let ourselves sink again to this level of inhumanity.
Yeah, sick people, boy. Sick people. So that is where this transpired before Earl Little and Louise Little is going to move out to Omaha, but that's what they were moving into. They were moving into that climate, and so it's not surprising the Ku Klux Klan, rolling up on in the beginning of Les Payne's book, rolling up on Louise Little like they did, because they looked at the Littles as troublemakers, and everywhere that the Littles went to organize black folks and spread Garveyism, they were looked at as troublemakers by the white community who looked to run them out of town. So Garveyism was a threat, just to put that out there. And so Les Payne, he does a great job of detailing that incident, or that lynching that took place. He sort of gives you some detail of the things that led up to it, and then everything that transpired during the lynching. So a lot that you don't get even in that 5-minute clip that I just showed. He does a great job of giving you that. And just to I want to read this from Les Payne's chapter. He says the Omaha police later verified that the kingpin of the local Irish crime syndicate, one-time pick-handled Dennison, had in several other instances paid whites in blackface to attack white women, not unlike Agnes Lobeck. That was the person who accused Will Brown. Lobeck, in order to embarrass Mayor Smith in City Hall. In a subsequent grand jury report stated several reported assaults reported in the Omaha Bee on white women had actually been perpetrated by whites in blackface. Right. I'm gonna stop there, but this is what they were doing. And so even in this situation, Will Brown, someone who had rheumatism, he constant pain, chronic pain in his joints, in his ligaments. This is someone who, by no stretch of the imagination, would have been able to do what was done to this woman, this attack. But he was murdered as a result. No trial, no jury, anything. And y'all seen shot 100 times, and then burnt. But for what? Something that was possibly orchestrated by an attack that was orchestrated by white folks. The same people who was causing all of this terror and chaos. But yeah, so that's how Les Payne, he kind of ends the chapter with that. And so going into chapter 2, storms of racism. That's going to be chapter 2. And so, definitely it come back. Probably, I don't know if it's going to be the next session that I do, but maybe I'll see, because I'm doing a lot of research on Malcolm X's internationalism. So I may do something on one of these articles that I'm reading, coming across a lot of good sources, man. So we'll see what happens. If not, I'll be covering the chapter 2s.
Conrad.
Go ahead, Conrad.
There's no difference in what we saw with the needy lynching. There's no difference in what we saw up in Marcy, New York City County Jail, where 12 to 14 guards murdered this brother Woods, gagged him, stuffed things down his throat on the video, and then tried to cover it up by not having any microphone on while they were doing their terrorist act. And this is just the beginning. Well, actually, it's been ongoing. You look at the goon squad down in Mississippi, how they sodomized those brothers, how they put the gun in the brother's mouth and pulled the trigger, shot a part of his tongue out, like it's some damn joke. But yet and still, we have to do a different thing. I think that protesting is okay in its place. I'm not a protester anymore. I used to protest. But I think that we need to come up with a different strategy, because begging them, pleading them, and I can guarantee you that at the end of the day, and I'm going to let it go, after all is said and done, no one will be severely charged for the brutal, vicious murder of Brother Woods, just like that punk, Daniel Penny, that got off of the murder of our comrade. It's sad that we see this all the time, and our children are terrorized, coming up time after time, and then being snatched from their mothers and put in some facility, sodomized and played with like some game. This is not a game. Uhuru.
Yeah, Uhuru. It just seemed like, the more things change, the more they remain the same. Same poop, different toilet. You know what I'm saying? The final thought, thoughts I'm going to have on this, because I'm gonna wrap up now. I appreciate everybody for tapping in, but I do want to mention another thing that Manning Marable does in his chapter 1, as he's ending the chapter off, and he's talking about what Louise Little is going through after Earl Little is murdered by the Ku Klux Klan. Now Louise Little is left to raise 4 children on her own. 4 children on her own, and she's constantly being harassed by the state and by her neighbors. Right? There's this terrorism that's taking place because Louise Little is going to eventually be admitted to a psychiatric institution. Right? She's caught, or the police catch her like walking barefoot in the snow during Christmas, December 25th, which is interesting. I don't know if they even celebrated Christmas, but I'm wondering if even, if they did, how the impact at the holidays, because they were a Christian family. So just, wondering if that had an impact, because, money was a thing, feeding her children. She was having a difficult time feeding her children. This is someone, her and her husband prided themselves on being independent, Black, independent, not relying on the state, not relying on colonizers, right, or anybody, so they're just doing for self. And so now you have a woman who prides herself in that, is now constantly being attacked by the state, being undermined. The money that she is owed in regards to the death of her husband, the insurance money, that money is like taken. She's being sort of gaslit. They're saying that it was an accident, so she's not owed this money. She has bills she has to pay. the white terrorists are going to murder the family's dog, according to Manning Marable. You know, he talks about that. Just imagine that family dog. This is the type of terrorism that they were experiencing. They were like literally drove Malcolm X's mother insane, man. You know, she couldn't get a job. She did things that even her, she went beyond, I guess, like she put her ego aside, right? Her pride, I'm gonna say pride. She put her pride to the side just to do, just to put food on the table for her children, right? And they're constantly telling her that she's unfit, because she can't put food on the table, or her children, are being children. They out there running wild. But this is what's happening to her, man. And it's sad, man, because just think about what her being a single mother is an example of how many, Black single mothers out there trying to make it in the system of colonialism. We all trying to make it, but just imagine just like, Black women with children, trying to make it. So it's not just, it's different when you try to make it on your own, when you just like, it's just me, I just got to worry about myself. That's different than being a single parent. And what really comes first is going to be those children. You want to make sure they're all right. You probably starve first, you make sure they eat before you eat, sort of thing, right? So this is what is happening with her. And then she meets someone, and the dynamic is going to change. She meets a man who has a job. Some stability is coming back into the house. According to, Wilford, I think Manning Marable talks about there's even marriage. There's this thought of marriage that might take place. And then this man finds out that Louise is pregnant. And what does he do? He gets out of Dodge. Like he leaves this mother of four pregnant, and this man just belts out. So now she, because even when they found her walking in the snow, she had the newborn in her arms. So what's that? What they call a post
traumatic stress syndrome?
No, like after a woman gives birth, like postmortem.
Postmortem. Yes.
Is that what it is?
Yes, postmortem syndrome.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah, so I can imagine that she's going through all of that. So now she has a fifth mouth to feed. But Manning Marable, he gets into that. He talks about that, and this is the context. Like this is how Malcolm sort of ends up in Boston, because Malcolm X now postpartum. Yeah, that's what I'm like. Mortal, know that mean like death? Postpartum. All right, appreciate that.
And thank you too for correcting me.
Like postmortem. All right, I'll roll with it. But Malcolm, he's getting into trouble. He ends up staying with some neighbors because the state sort of forces Malcolm out the household. But it does ease the load for Louise. But then Malcolm has to, he gets sent to postpartum. Yeah. Malcolm gets sent to a juvie, not a juvie, but like the county, sort of like a foster care. So Malcolm's in foster care. But then Ella comes to the rescue. So Ella, this is Manning Marable, because Les Payne doesn't get this far. Manning Marable speaks about Ella coming to Lansing to help out. Tells Malcolm he can come visit for the summer. Malcolm goes visits Ella for a summer in Boston, and then goes back to Lansing. And then they noticed something different. The family said they noticed something different in Malcolm. He's moving differently, right? Moving more with like a purpose in regards to just wanting to better himself. Remember, Malcolm's getting in trouble, but Malcolm's a good student. He was class president in the 8th grade. Malcolm was trying out for some sports that he wasn't too good at, basketball or boxing. But when he comes back, he makes the football team. So Malcolm, he's playing football, he's doing good. But now, the teachers are discouraging Malcolm to take on, to pursue certain fields. And we sort of see this in the X movie. Malcolm's talking about wanting to be a lawyer. And they're like, why don't you try carpentry? So Malcolm is getting discouraged, right? And he eventually drops out of school. This is like, white political economic domination. This is what our ancestors were going through. So when we see, we're the product of this, all of this right here, that is happening, right? This marginalization that was taking place. So there's, as you can see, like, this is going to create some sort of acceptance of a position in this society for a while, until there's like the Black Power, Civil Rights, Black Power movement. But Malcolm, he's getting in trouble again, and he's eventually, Ella's going to ask Malcolm to come stay with him in Boston. She's going to send some fare. Now, Les Payne is going to talk about all of this too. And the thing about it, so keep this in mind. Manning Marable, he's already at the end of chapter 1. He's talking about Malcolm going to Boston. Les Payne is going to cover more of what's going to be taking place in Lansing, the child as Malcolm as a child. So all of that Manning Marable doesn't cover, Les Payne gets into that. Like, what was Malcolm actually doing as an adolescent? What was some of the trouble he was getting into? Who was he dating? Like, Les Payne does a great job. So you're going to get that in his book, which, one of the reasons why, I would recommend it before some of the other books, because you are going to get some more nuance in Les Payne's book. So with that being said, man, it's 8:11. I'm going to come back and probably, when I cover chapter 2 of this book, when I do that, probably just go back and review some of the things that I didn't cover today, because it's a lot, man. It's a lot in both those chapters. But Brother Sayer, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, that teacher's name was Ostrowski in Mason, Michigan, where Malcolm was the president. And believe it or not, future years later, they name a street after Malcolm. I don't get it. You don't love us, but you make streets after Malcolm and Martin, Baldwin, and other streets, but you don't love us.
Hey, talk about
and
it.
You're contradictory hypocrite, punk. Oh,
man. Hey, talk about it. All right. Hey, appreciate you joining the stage. Appreciate everybody for tapping in. And like, hey, I hope there was something that you got out of this session, man. You learned something, but we want to keep on doing this. I'm trying to, cover as much as I can in this short amount of time about Malcolm's life, and hopefully bring in some information that we might not have thought about or knew before. Yeah, hey, Sister Kiana said he loves us when we're dead, man. So, hey, speaking of love all of y'all, man. Continue to carry on this legacy. Let's not just, theorize. Let's get to work, man. Malcolm started something. Malcolm was carrying on something, and he left us with something. So let's pick it up. Let's carry it on. Malcolm, Fred Hamptons, to the Hueys, the Bobby Huttons. And all the unsung, heroes and leaders. Let's do it, man. Revolution is the solution.
Akima Ojori too. You got to put Comrade Akima Ojori up there. A bad
pressure.
Black studies professor. He loves you, Comrade.
Love you. Uhuru. Black Power.
Uhuru.
See y'all again on Sunday.
The white power structure, because that's all we have in America. And the white power structure today is just as much interested in perpetuating slavery as the white power structure was 100 years ago. Only now they use modern methods of doing so. And realizing that the black people in this country are waking up and becoming filled with a desire to be looked upon as men and as human beings. The white power structure, to slow down that struggle for freedom and human dignity, uses tricks. 100 years ago, they could do it with chains. today they use tricks. And one of the tricks that they've invented is this token integration, to get Negro, so-called Negro leaders to accept a few token crumbs of integration that don't solve any problem for the masses of black people in this country whatsoever, but it does make the hand-picked Negroes be satisfied to slow down the cry of the masses. And a good example of that is as soon as the spirit of rebellion or revolution began to spread among the masses of black people in this country, and they began to take an active part, and they showed that they weren't confined to this nonviolent approach, then the government or the power structure began to sit up and take notice and